Raiders versus Chargers week 1, we can call a self-inflicted loss. That plus more on Monday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for September 9th, 2024.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast to get the latest edition of the show as soon as it becomes available. And as always, if you're checking us out on YouTube, we do appreciate that. The show has grown in a major way, and that's because of the support of you, Raider Nation, and because of the job my man Ari does. He does a fantastic job on the back end, making sure we're up every single day, looking good and sounding good. We shout him out. We appreciate him. He's on Twitter at Ari Produces. I'm on Twitter as well, at your boy Q254. And if you want to be a part of the show, the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line is 707-654-4693. And I'll just take a quick second to explain the voicemail line. It is exactly that. It's a voicemail line. You call that number, 707-654-4693. You can leave a message that's up to 3 minutes long, and I'll try my best to get it on the show. Or you could text that number, 707-654-4693, and leave your message, and I'll try my best to get it on the show. It is in no way my phone number. It is in no way a phone number that you're going to receive a call back from. And apparently I thought that was pretty obvious, but maybe it's not, and that's okay. But I had this situation over the weekend where a listener got very angry because I did not call back. That number does not call back. That is not my personal phone number. That is a voicemail line. If you want to give your 2 cents on the show, that is what it's for you to call in or text in. It's not for me and you to get on the phone and have a conversation about. And again, not trying to sound disrespectful, but I thought it was a pretty obvious situation. But when I ran into that situation over the weekend, I realized, okay, maybe it's not. And I know that a lot of folks are frustrated by a Raiders loss, but believe me, getting on the phone with me is not going to change anything. So just letting it be known that that is a voicemail line only. It is not my personal phone number, 707-654-4693. With that being said, I'll get as many of your calls and texts in coming up in segment number 3 of today's show. Segment number 2, we're going to talk about the Raiders offense because, well, the defense, in my opinion, did its job, even though the box score, if you look at it, it'll look like the Raiders did not do very good defensively at all. The Raiders offense just did not do their job. They did not complement the defense like they were supposed to do, and it felt very similar to the game when the Raiders lost 3-0 to the Vikings at home, right? Just the offense was pretty much non-existent outside of one big play from Alexander Mattison. So we'll talk about that Raiders offense. We'll do that coming up in segment number 2. Here in segment number 1, it's just news and notes of the day, and we'll jump right into it. Obviously, we're just reacting to the game, 22-10. The Raiders lose to the Chargers, week 1 of the regular season. We'll do all that after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. I'll tell you a lot more about them later on in the show. But as mentioned off top, as we all know, Raider Nation, the Raiders dropped to 0-1 on the season after the 22-10 loss to the Chargers. And again, it looks like the Raiders defense didn't do their job. It looks like the Chargers had no problem defeating the Raiders, but that was not really the case. The case was the Raiders had a bunch of self-inflicted wounds, right? 3 turnovers. The Chargers had 0 turnovers, right? The Chargers had 4 sacks. The Raiders had 1 sack. The Raiders, to their credit, only had 2 penalties for 15 yards, where the Chargers had 7 penalties for 50 yards, and most of those were, false starts. So I really want to give Raider Nation that was there in attendance at SoFi Stadium a lot of credit for getting loud and making it uncomfortable in the Chargers' home stadium. I got to shout them out. But between the just ineptness, I should say, of the Raiders offense, the self-inflicted wounds like the turnovers that the Raiders had, Gardner Minshew had a fumble, Zamir White had a fumble, and then there was an interception at the end when the game was already said and done. Khalil Mack tips the ball, and big number 95 for the Chargers intercepts it, takes it back a few yards, but the game was already in the books at that stage of the game. That was the key cog to the Raiders losing this game on Sunday, and the defense did their job. And then AP, Antonio Pierce, the head coach, had questionable decisions. In my opinion, none was worse than that 4th and 1 call when the Raiders have really good field position set up by the defense, and Trey Tucker, special teams-wise, and a punt return. They're on the 43-yard line of the Chargers, down, 17-10 with just over 7 minutes left in the game. And on 4th and 1, they decided to punt the ball. You cannot punt the ball there. You have to go for it, right? There's one thing Antonio Pierce told us in the press conference last week is that the difference between last year and this year is the Raiders expect to win. if you don't go for it on 4th and 1, down 7 with 7 and some change left to go in the game, you don't expect to win. Right. And I get it. The Raiders have been stopped on 4th and 1 early in the game, and that was a questionable decision. I was fine with them going for it. If they didn't pick it up, fine. Okay. It was in the first, it was in the first quarter, and the Chargers only got 3 points out of it. So, okay, no harm, no foul, no big deal. But late in the game, 4th and 1, you've got to make that decision to go for it. You just have to. You can't say that I believe that the defense is going to get the ball back. And I understand why you would think the defense could get the ball back, because they played really good ball all day long. They gave the Raiders an opportunity to win the game, something that we expected. But to not go for it on 4th and 1 was very critical. And really, it's disappointing. The reason why it's disappointing as far as I'm concerned is that Marvin Lewis is on the staff, right? Joe Philbin is on the staff. The Raiders have 29 coaches on the staff. They have in-game situational coaches on the staff to make the right decisions. And it just seems like, and this happened in the preseason game as well. I want to say, was it against Minnesota? It was I think it was against Minnesota, where there was a bad decision at the end for AP when he was using timeouts. I think that was the first preseason game. And I said, well, I just chalked it up to it being a preseason game. But then when it rears its ugly head back in the regular season, that's when it's a problem. And look, I get it. Antonio Pierce is going to make mistakes. He's a young head coach in the National Football League. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're a young head coach, if you're a seasoned veteran. You've got to make the right decisions. You've got to put your team in the best position to win the game. So as far as I'm concerned, the Raiders lose 22-10 to the Chargers. I don't even give the Chargers a ton of credit, except for they made the right plays when they had to, right? I mean, obviously you got to give them credit for winning the game. But really, like I said at the top, this was a self-inflicted loss by the Raiders. And that's a tough pill to swallow when you know that the next game is next week in Baltimore, taking on the Ravens. But here's Antonio Pierce. Vinny Bonsignore asked him about that 4th and 1 decision late in the game. Here was his response to that, plus a couple other follow-ups.
I mean, field position, defensively, punter. I mean, we got what we wanted. We got him backed up. We got 3 timeouts there. Play good football, get the ball back, half court, as we call it, offense, midfield, hopefully. But they broke off a long run, and that was the end of it.
Yeah, 2 long runs that the defense gave up. The defense played good, but 2 spots right there where they didn't play necessarily great. That run game, stopping the run game, you've talked about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, for the most part, pretty solid. But when the game was on the line, and we got to fit up the run correctly, and guys got to get off blocks, and second level defenders got to fit up. We did a poor job of that, and hats off to them. They stayed consistent with their game. They didn't beat themselves.
Coach, specifically, what do you guys need to work on the offense?
A lot. I mean, the run game was poor. Passing game was off. And then turnovers is just, you can't do it. You can't have 3 turnovers on the road and expect to win.
Antonio, it seemed like the camera panned to you when you guys were getting ready to punt, and it seemed like you were in conversation on the headset. Was that something with the game management?
You talking about the same question that I just got asked?
Yeah, I was just saying, were you consider maybe taking?
Yeah, no, we was considered going for it as a long one. I mean, got stopped earlier in the game, momentum. Punter had done a good job, pinning those guys back. I think we had 2 or 3 points. I think 3 punts inside the 20. Again, defense was the strength for the most part of the game. Keep them back there with 3 timeouts.
That was the explanation right there by the head coach, Antonio Pierce. I'm interested to see if he'll still have the same explanation today when we meet with him. We'll talk with him at the Intermountain Health Performance Center coming up at 11 o'clock this morning. So I'm interested in, if Vinny doesn't ask or someone else asks, I'll definitely ask if he still is comfortable with that decision, because ultimately I think that was a bad decision. I don't like to be the guy to second guess coaches. They know a whole hell of a lot more than I do. They know a whole hell of a lot more than you do. But in certain situations, you just got to make that call. And like AP said last year or last week, that the difference between when he was the interim coach to now, they expect to win. Making that call and not going for it on 4th and 1, to me, doesn't seem like he expected to win the game and that his offense was going to be able to hold it, or his offensive line was going to be able to get enough push to pick up that first down. And even if they're struggling, and the O-line did struggle all game long, let's make no mistake about it. We talked about them being able to run, and we'll talk about this in segment number 2. They weren't able to really get any running going until late in the game, late in the second half, and then Zamir White has a fumble, so that didn't help him. That was another self-inflicted wound. The offensive line struggled. There's no doubt about it. There's no way that you can, dress it up or put lipstick on it and think that it's going to look any better. It's still put lipstick on a pig. The offensive line struggled. The offense in general struggled. Again, we'll talk more about that coming up in segment number 2. But, it's wild. I've talked about this team and their offense and it being a ball control offense. They actually had the ball for 31-plus minutes, and the Chargers only had it for 28. And the Raiders lost the game 22-10. But that offense has got to get cleaned up quick, fast, in a hurry. I don't care if it's Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell, but the offense in week 1 was broken. We'll talk about it coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about a couple of the great sponsors here on the Locked On Raiders podcast, including the title sponsor, PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. And unlike other apps, on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. So think about this. One Caleb Williams passing yard is going to get you one win on PrizePicks every week in September. So if you had that on Sunday, obviously Caleb Williams and the Bears, they got the victory, not necessarily because of him, but he threw for more than a yard. So that would actually get you a win. All September long, you can get 4 weeks of free dubs. So you don't want to miss that deal on PrizePicks. It's gone when September ends. And you could also play PrizePicks against some celebrities like Drewski, Joe Budden, MMA champ Sugar Shane O'Malley. You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in PrizePicks community each week. I believe Big Sean is part of it. And a whole lot of folks play PrizePicks. What do you have to do? All you got to do is download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks. Run your game. I also want to let you know that today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast is brought to you by BetterHelp. And if you thought about something that you'd love to learn, even as an adult, something that you say, you know what, I missed out on the opportunity to learn it as a kid or even a teenager, I want to go back. Because kids are always learning stuff, right? There's sometimes that kids will tell you what they learn. And you're like, wait, hold on. How did that even happen? When did you learn to do that? Oh, we were doing it at school, or in my youth group, or whatever it is, whatever little group that they have, or after school special, whatever the case may be, their clubs that they're in. All of a sudden they're learning stuff. You're like, wait a minute, hold on. When did you learn how to do all that? Well, there's always something that we'd like to learn as adults, right? Maybe it's a new language. Maybe it's how to be an expert at getting your yard right. You want to be able to be a lawn expert. For me, like I don't know how to do a lot of handyman type stuff. So maybe I can learn some handyman stuff. Probably not. At my age, I think it's probably too late. But you never really know. If you're thinking of starting therapy, you can give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you got to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched up with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. You can rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOn today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, BetterHelp.com/LockedOn. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to deep dive into the Raiders offense, what we saw week 1 from Luke Getsy and the crew. Gardner Minshew obviously gets the start. There was a quarterback competition throughout the course of training camp and preseason. Gardner Minshew gets named the starting quarterback. And, of course, there's a lot of controversy about that back and forth. I get hit up on Twitter at your boy Q254 all day long. O'Connell should start. Minshew should start. Minshew should start. O'Connell should start. Look, at the end of the day, Raider Nation, that's who you have. Those are the 2 quarterbacks that you have. And I've said it for a long time. I think that both quarterbacks will definitely get some play this year. And if it looks anything like it did on Sunday, then O'Connell will probably get some play sooner rather than later, right? We've been talking about the first 4 games of the season. We've been talking about the first quarter and how important it is for the Raiders to get off to a hot start. Well, they're 0-1, and they got to go on a road trip to Baltimore. And that's not going to be easy. We saw what the Ravens were able to do against the Chiefs, even though they came up a little bit short. Their offense looked like it was, pretty much clicking on all cylinders, some Lamar Jackson missed passes, and that game could have been a lot different. So then I look at the Raiders offense and say, man, what was that? Even though, again, you look at the box score and you say, okay, not too bad, right? Gardner Minshew had a decent day, but man, it just nothing ever seemed to be able to click. Right? The run game couldn't get established going, and we've talked about it. My keys offensively to a successful day on Sunday were establish the run, consistent and smart quarterback play, stay ahead of the chain, stay on schedule. And guess what didn't happen? They didn't establish the run. Matter of fact, Zamir White had a couple runs early in the game, and then he was pulled. Right? Alexander Mattison ended up getting in there, and he's the one who scored the touchdown, and that was actually on a catch and run, and it was a really good play from him. right? And that put the Raiders up 7-3 at first, and then it was 7-6, and then eventually the Chargers take the lead. But they never were able to establish the run. And right when Zamir White comes in and really does start to get a little things cooking a little bit, he puts the ball on the ground, right? And that's one of the biggest things that we've been talking about. And I said it. I was at my guy Vegas Jess's house watching the game, and I said it to him the whole game. I said they have to be able to run the ball. This team is not going to be good enough to sling the ball around the yard, pick up a bunch of yards, and have some big explosive plays and think you're going to win. Devontae, looked good, had a handful of catches. Jacoby Myers looked good, had a handful of catches, right? I thought Trey Tucker did well. Brock Bowers obviously was a guy that was going to be targeted early and often, but it never seemed like it was in a rhythm. That was the thing. I mean, you can go back and look at numbers and say, 6 catches for Brock. That's cool. 5 for Devontae. And, he had 3 or 4 first downs. Okay, great, right? But it was never consistent. It was never in a rhythm, right? It seemed like Gardner Minshew was uncomfortable all game long. I had plenty of people hitting me up. You need to put Aiden O'Connell in there for a spark. And I'm thinking, if you need a spark in the third quarter of the first game of the season, you're really in trouble. Really. And the Raiders might be. They might be in trouble. We questioned it all offseason. What was the offense by Luke Getsy going to look like? After the first preseason game, I said, you know what? I feel a little bit more confident as long as they can, what I said was key number 3, stay ahead of the chains and stay on schedule. And too many times I looked up and it was 3rd and 7, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 11. Right? 2nd and 12. There was too many times that happened. They cannot have that kind of production. They cannot have those type of, and I say opportunities, not really opportunities. They can't have that down and distance. They have to be a team that's going to be able to stay ahead of the change and stay on schedule. So there's different options of what they can do. Right. And they've got to be able to pick up 3rd and 2 on the ground or 2nd and 2. And one of the things about the offense that bothered me, there was a few times, even the first drive of the game, the Raiders, the very first drive, the very first pass, Minshew drops back, throws it to Jacoby Myers for 9 yards. They end up punting. They couldn't pick up 1 yard. And for me, and this is just me, I'm not an offensive coordinator. For me, if you get 2nd and 1 or 2nd and 2, why not take a shot? Why not try to have a bigger play? Because 3rd and 1 you should be able to pick up. Right? And I know that the offensive line is not exactly what the offensive line is going to be when it's all said and done. We know it's going to be Colton Miller, JPJ, Andre James, Dylan Parham, and Thayer Munford. So Cody Whitehair is in there right now, but he wasn't the only problem. The Raiders offensive line, who has not been a cohesive unit throughout training camp and preseason, did not look very good. It was getting manhandled quite a bit from Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack. And again, the Chargers had 4 sacks to the Raiders 1. And it's funny because the Raiders might have only had 1 sack, but they had Justin Herbert on the run throughout the whole game, right? And he wasn't really running a lot, but just they had him under duress. Crosby lived in the backfield. Wilkins lived in the backfield. Tyree Wilson, before he went out with a knee injury, was living in the backfield. Like, guys stepped up, right? I mean, Charles Snowden, he stepped up. He looked good, but they just couldn't make a play. And it almost felt like it got to the point of the game where I was watching and said, man, the defense is going to have to score. And that's only week 1, right? You don't want to have that type of situation. So I know I'm not going to overreact. I'm not going to go, get too high or get too low. Even if the Raiders had won 22-10, I wouldn't have got too high because it is only week 1. And we know that it's not the finished product. We know that it's still a work in progress. And basically it's like preseason game number 1. But the offense has got to get cleaned up quick. I still think that Gardner Minshew, and this will be a question we ask Antonio Pierce later on today, I think, Gardner Minshew is still going to get an opportunity to be the starter. He wasn't the ultimate problem. I mean, he did have a bad turnover where he basically fumbled it at the end of the first half, and that was a critical drive. That was a critical drive. I do want to highlight that. He fumbles. The Raiders have about 2 minutes and some change on the clock and 3 timeouts. And they had an opportunity to double dip, meaning they could have gone down the field, scored anything, plus got the ball back to start the third quarter, and they were winning at that point. They were up 7-3. So that could have allowed them to have some separation if they could just say, for S's and giggles, say they got in the end zone twice, right? All of a sudden they're up 21-3. I don't think the Chargers are coming back from that. That's the opportunities that they have to be able to take advantage of, even if they had an opportunity to kick a field goal. And look, Daniel Carlson missed a field goal, right? And it was to me, it was a bad snap. And that's what I thought through the whole playoff. And I called it as soon as I saw the snap. I was like, that was a bad snap. And then Carlson misses it. There's more times than not you can count on Cash Money Carlson to go out there and make the play. But the whole process has got to be right. So, again, I don't want to overreact and say this team is, doom and gloom and they're going to have the number 1 overall pick in the draft in April. I'm not saying that. But this offense has got to get fixed quick. It really does. The offense was the reason why this team lost. The offense is the side of the ball that had the self-inflicted wounds, right? From Minshew throwing an interception at the end, him fumbling early on, Carlson missing the field goal, them going for it on 4th and 1 in their territory and not picking it up. And then also on AP, I don't want to let this get lost. AP not going for it on 4th and 1 late in the game. That was a big, bad coaching decision. There's no way you could put it, right? I mean, if we could praise him for what he's done for the team, we also have to be willing to criticize him for what he did. And that was a critical mistake by a young head coach with a lot of experience on his coaching staff. And you would have thought they would have made the call to say, hey, man, we've got to go for it. There's no guaranteeing that we're going to get the ball back. Or if we do get the ball back, there's no guaranteeing that we're only going to be down like 6 points, right? I mean, that's the harsh reality of it. They had to find a way to pick up that 4th and 1, and they weren't able to do it. But, the offensive line, I don't know if JPJ is going to come back this week. Even if he does, it's still going to be a new unit. Right. And that's the thing about the offensive line. The offensive line has to work together. It's not just one individual. It's not like Devontae's out there or Jacoby's out there. All 5 guys have to be on the same page. If they are, they could be really good at run blocking. And they got better towards the end of the game. Right. But they needed to be better at the beginning of the game. And they just weren't. So that's all something. And that's a lot of work that they're going to have to do and, prepare themselves this upcoming week as they get ready for a business trip all the way to Baltimore to take on the Ravens, who are also 0-1 on the season. But the style of game that we saw on Sunday was pretty much the style of game that we all expected to see. A lot of heavy dose run game from the Chargers, heavy dose of the run game from the Raiders. And it really didn't pop for the Chargers till end of the game when the Raiders defense was on the field so long. It just felt like, all right, that dam is about to break. And it eventually did. But the offense, definitely I have a high level of concern for the whole unit, not just the quarterback position, but the whole unit as it stands right now. And they're 0-1. Coming up in segment number 3, your calls and text straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about a great sponsor here on the Locked On Raiders podcast, which is GameTime. GameTime has a new feature called GameTime Picks. It makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. It filters out a bunch of the fluff, so you get right down to what you need, right? The tickets to whatever event you're looking for, they've got that covered. They've got super deals. They've got seat views. They've got the lowest price guarantee. They even have ticket coverage. So your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticket industry. But to me, one of the greatest features is the seat view. You get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. So if you're deciding that, hey, I'm going to make the trip to Baltimore, I'm going to go see the Raiders and the Ravens, and you're not familiar with that stadium, you can find some seats in the GameTime app and decide, okay, these are where I want them, and then see what they look like before you buy them, so you know that those are real good quality seats. That, to me, is one of the best features that they have on the app. Right now, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create that account, use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create the account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. It's all one word for $20 off. Download GameTime today. What time is it? Game time. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. We'll start off with a call from Central Valley Raider. He's calling to give his feedback on the game from multiple angles. Here he is, Central Valley Raider.
Q, what's going on? Central Valley Raider. Where do I begin? I will start off defensively. Very excited that we were very aggressive. We didn't allow Herbert to just pick us apart. That was the good thing. I like the little creativity, the stunts, those type of things. It was nice to see. And Herbert wasn't quick enough to decipher that and pick us apart. So that was good. Now, the negative. I think Getsy, Minshew, we have so many damn weapons. They are overwhelmed. They are literally overwhelmed because they shut themselves down. I don't know. We made this game harder than what it had to be. I don't know what the hell you want to call it, fumble, pass, whatever. That's where it fell apart. Is when Minshew tried to throw the quick slant and it fumbled. That's where I felt like everybody just took a deep breath and like, oh crap, here we go. That's what it looked like. The other thing is the defense was on there so long that eventually they wore down the fourth quarter, and you could tell because they started pounding the rock. So hopefully we can fix that next week and going forward. But I like that we got Devontae a couple passes, got him in there. You know, we got some things going. But very disappointed in the situation. I mean, there's so much I could talk about and only have a few minutes to say it. There's some positive, negatives, but this is a game we should have won. We should have been up 14-3 at the half, and we just fell apart. So that's going to kill us. We got Baltimore next. The bad thing is this guy's a weapon in himself. So we can shut down everything, but he's going to get those little nasty 2 or 3 yards that Herbert didn't do. Even if we blitz and we miss, it's a wrap. So hopefully we do something better. All right, Q. Thank you for all you do, baby. Raider Nation. Love.
CV, thanks for the call, my man. Appreciate you. Defense was really good, right? And we knew that they had a really good chance of being a really good defense. And it's funny because my big question about the defense was the run defense going to be a lot better than what we saw in the preseason? And it absolutely was. So there's no concern there. I'm very confident that this defense is going to help this team go far. But the other side of the ball is what I'm concerned. And we knew that if the Raiders defense was on the field for a long time, even though if you look at the actual time of possession, the Raiders they held the ball longer than the Chargers did. It's just got to be better. And we knew that there was a chance that they would get worn down at the end, especially when they're going out there time in and time out and seeing their offense not having any kind of success whatsoever. And I don't think it was necessarily the Raiders offensive staff was overwhelmed. I just think they weren't good, right? And so I think we'll see and learn a lot about this Raiders offense in the next few weeks. Like, I mean, honestly, if this is what it looks like in week 4 after they play the Browns, I mean, this could easily be like a 3-14 team. Right. I mean, but again, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. It's one game, right? It's one game, first game of the regular season. Things could always, evolve. But if they go, through 4 games and the offense looks like it's a struggle bus like it was on Sunday, this really could end up being a long season for that offensive side of things. And maybe the only way they win games is by the defense scoring points. But we'll see. Central Valley Raider, thanks so much for the call. It's great to hear from you. Up next, got a text from LA Raiders Steve. Q. Let's not lie to ourselves. It's going to be another long season. Can't push the ball down the field. Run game is erratic. Defense looked okay, except for when we actually needed them to stop the Chargers offense. Seen a lot of Raider football, bad Raider football, and I'm only seeing minor improvements. I know it's game 1, but if they don't make dramatic changes real soon, they're not going to be a playoff team, and they're not going to be a playoff team to talk about. So there's LA Raiders Steve with the text, and I'll say the Raiders defense was really good. They were really good for a long time. Right? I mean, they every time the Raiders offense put them in a bad position, like think about this. They gave up the ball. Khalil Mack returned that Gardner Minshew fumble or whatever you want to call it all the way to the 12-yard line. And the only thing the Chargers were able to do was get 5 yards and a field goal. Like, I'll take that. The Raiders gave them the ball on their 40-yard line, right? The Raiders went for it on 4th and 1, didn't get it. It was on their side of the ball. They gave that up. The defense only allowed a field goal, right? I mean, so I'll take that. For the longest, it was 7-9, right? So the defense did their job. The offense did not. That's why, to me, it felt very similar to that Vikings 3-0 victory after coming off the bye week in 2023. That's what it felt like. That just offense could not click at all. So, I'm not trying to be dramatic. I'm not going to get, like I said, too high or too low off of week 1, but I'll give it the first 4 games before we decide, how good this offense is not going to be, right? But thanks for the text. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a call from Colin right here in Vegas. He's calling with his thoughts on the game, and he's pointing the finger directly at the head coach. Here he is, Colin in Vegas.
What's up, Q? This is Colin here in Vegas, man. Man, today's my birthday, and let me tell you, man, the Raiders, they ruined my birthday, man. I'm tired of this, man. I know it's week 1, and people say give it time, but I was disgusted watching this game, man. It was like watching a Josh McDaniels offense again. And I got to blame this game on Antonio Pierce, man. His defense looked good, man, but at the end, they can't hold these teams the whole game, man. They get tired. His offense, though, looked weak, man. It didn't look like ill intent and violent. It didn't look like that. It looked weak. How the hell you get pushed around by a team that wears powder blue, man? I'm pissed right now, man. I'm sick to my stomach. This is his fault because the biggest issue issue with the offense last year. He goes and gets Luke Getsy. All summer we've heard how bad this offense was, and it looked like today, man. Mark Davis needs to be fuming, man. You know, I have a story about Mark Davis when I met him in the summer, but I don't want to share it. But I know he ain't happy about this quarterback. I don't know if it's too soon to pull it on Gardner, man, but something needs to be done, man. Because 0-2 is looking real feasible, man. Anyways, man, go Raiders, and looking like we're going through another long season. Thank you, man. Appreciate you, Q. Keep up the hard work, man. Big fan.
Colin, thanks for the call. Appreciate the frustration, my man. And as I talked about in segment number 1, AP definitely shares some of the blame. And especially on that 4th and 1, you've got to go for it. There's no other way about it, right? I get it that you're trying to put the defense out there. You think that they're going to get a 3 and out and get the ball back, but that's asking them to do a lot of heavy lifting all game long. I know you want to win with the defense. I get it, but you've got to give them the opportunity. You've got to be able to support them offensively as well. And like he told us last week in the press conference, this team expects to win. Not going for it on 4th and 1 to me felt like they did not expect to win. But thanks so much for that call. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a text from JC Raiders. Say, what's up, Q? JC from the 805 here. I just finished watching the game, and I can't help but feel like DC needs some appreciation after today. Quarterback play was abysmal. Minshew looked lost most of the game. I'm not sure if Aiden would have done any better. I supported the idea of drafting the next franchise quarterback, but I wasn't a fan when they got rid of DC because I knew it was only to save McDaniel's job. It was a good move for him, but not for the team. The team needs a game manager that can distribute the ball. Not a hero right now. All in all, I'm rooting for Minshew and O'Connell, but I feel like it's going to be a long season. Let's hope for the best. Raider Nation. That's from JC Raider. And I'm sure there's a lot of fans out there that felt like, Derek Carr would do a lot better with this defense. And he probably would, right? But at the end of the day, the decision was made to move on from him, and I think it's probably good for him. I'm sure it's good for the team at some point just because, they were kind of stuck in a rut. And, it gave him an opportunity to go out there and do something different with a different team. And you saw the results of what they did on Sunday against the Carolina Panthers. Had a big explosive game. Their defense did a lot of heavy lifting as well, but they had a big game. So I don't try to keep looking back. I'm trying to look forward. And I do believe that the Raiders need to find their franchise quarterback, whoever that's going to be, right? They've got to be able to find it. I don't believe in finding that guy in free agency. I think they've got to eventually do what they got to do to get their guy in the draft. But we'll see. Again, it's a very long season. It's only week 1, right? There's at least 16 more games that the team will play and at least 17 more weeks of the regular season. So thanks, like I said, so much for that text. I do appreciate you. And let's get one more call in. This one's from Javi from the 209, who was actually at the game. Here he is, Javi from the 209.
What's up, Q? Javi in the 209. Here, after a disappointing loss here in LA at SoFi. That's whack, man. Honestly, the Raiders don't deserve us. We travel 5-6 hours to come watch the game. More fans than these damn Charger fans. They still kick our ass. It's just disappointing, man. It's sad. I just feel like we messed up, honestly, not drafting Harbaugh. It's sad to say. It's the first game, I know that. Don't over exaggerate, but we suck. We traveled here. We're the majority. We still lost. It's disappointing. What can you say? We suck. Peace out, man. Thank you.
Avi, thanks for the call. Appreciate you. And clearly very frustrated and totally get it, right? Totally understand the frustration. I've been saying it for a long time about the fan base. It's like players, they come and go. Coaches, they come and go. We all know about free agency, what that's all about. And, one day there's a guy that's drafted to your team, and then all of a sudden he's playing for another team, like Khalil Mack, right? Drafted to the Raiders, now playing against them on Sunday with the Chargers. But the one thing that always remains the same is Raider Nation. Right, the fan base always remains the same. The fan base always remains loyal. Travels, like you travel from the 209 all the way to SoFi, and that's a lot of wear and tear on your car, on your wallet, right? Everything, and to be disappointed and really for the team, only half the team to show up, right? The offense really did nothing. Was really disappointing. So I totally get it, man. And I've said it for a long time. I feel like the fans deserve a lot better. And to see the fans really take over SoFi Stadium and the Chargers fans be overwhelmed. That's awesome to see, but I wish the Raiders fans had been, rewarded for their efforts. And, now they're going to go to Baltimore. That's not going to be the case. Baltimore is going to be loud and proud. Their fans are going to be there. It's going to be a tough one. And then they return home on week 3 against the Carolina Panthers. Then week 4, the Cleveland Browns. And, again, we'll know a lot about this team following week 4 of this regular season. But, Javi, thanks so much for the call. And I know the win would have made you have a good time at the game, but hopefully you were able to have a good time anyway with some family and friends, and hopefully you guys were really safe out there and returned home and made it home safely as well. So that's going to do it for today's show. I got a text from B-Sturdy Raider, a text from Angry Raider, a text from Assassin's Ghost that we'll get to coming up tomorrow. And, of course, we'll have more calls. We'll have plenty of, news and notes. We did find out over the weekend, I didn't mention this in segment number 1, that Malcolm Kuntz is on the IR. He's going to miss at least 4 games with the knee injury that he suffered on Thursday at practice, which is very unfortunate. Thought he was going to be a key cog. But we'll talk to Antonio Pierce coming up at 11 o'clock this morning. We'll get his thoughts on the team, after he was able to look at the film, what he thought about the offense and what they're going to do to get things fixed quick, fast, in a hurry, because they got a hungry Baltimore team that they got to go face in Baltimore coming up next week. So until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.